Rain had been falling since morning, washing the city in shades of gray. Inside the small cafe on the corner of Willow Street, the world was quieter. Just the soft hum of music, the clinking of cups, and the smell of freshly ground coffee that mingled with the damp chill outside. Near the window sat a young woman, her hands wrapped tightly around an empty cup as if warmth could be borrowed from something long gone cold. Her clothes were neat but worn, her eyes tired but searching. She had been there for hours, staring out into the rain as if waiting for someone or something that would change everything. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in the magic of small moments that change lives forever, please take a second to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us keep spreading stories that remind the world compassion still exists. Her name was Amara. 2 months ago, she had packed her small suitcase and left her hometown, chasing a dream that once seemed close enough to touch. She had been top of her class, the kind of girl who stayed up late with books and big plans. When she got a call for an interview at a design firm in the city, it felt like fate was finally smiling. But the city was bigger, colder, and far less forgiving than she had imagined. The interview didn't go well. The savings ran out faster than expected, and the one friend she thought she could rely on stopped answering her messages after she borrowed a little money for rent. Now she was here, inside the cafe where warmth cost at least the price of 1 cup. She had ordered coffee hours ago just to have a reason to stay. The waiter, a young man with soft eyes and sleeves rolled up past his elbows, had noticed. His name tag read Eli, and though he smiled at every customer, his gaze lingered on Amara a little longer each time he passed. He could tell something was wrong, not because she looked lost, but because she looked like she was trying hard not to. Evening fell, one by one. The customers left, the lights dimmed, and the open sign flicked off. Amara was still there, staring at her phone screen that had long gone black. She didn't have the courage to get up yet, because once she stepped outside, there would be nowhere else to go. She had been walking the city all week, looking for job postings, offering to do anything, cleaning, organizing, helping. But most places turned her away with polite words that meant nothing. The coins in her pocket weren't enough for the bus, and she hadn't eaten since morning. Eli wiped the last table and walked over, trying to find the right words. He didn't want to embarrass her. "We're about to close," he said softly. She looked up, startled, then nodded and tried to smile. It was the kind of smile that broke hearts, the kind people give when they're pretending they're fine. She stood, adjusted her coat, and reached for her small purse. When she opened it, he saw the hesitation. She pulled out a few crumpled notes and coins, not enough to cover the bill. He reached over the counter before she could speak and said, "It's okay, I'll cover it." Her eyes widened, a mix of relief and shame. She shook her head. "I can't let you do that. It's just coffee," he said. "Don't worry about it." But her voice trembled as she whispered, "I can't even afford the bus ride home." The words hung in the air, heavy and raw. Eli felt something twist inside him, something that wasn't pity but recognition. He had known that kind of quiet desperation once, years ago when he'd lost everything after his father's illness. He knew what it was like to count coins and pretend you weren't hungry. Without another word, he took off his apron, folded it neatly, and placed it on the counter. "Sit down," he said gently. "Let me make you something to eat." Amara blinked, unsure if she'd heard right, but his tone was calm, steady, like this wasn't charity, but a simple act of humanity. She hesitated, then nodded and sat down again. Her fingers trembling slightly. He disappeared into the kitchen, and within minutes, the smell of toasted bread and warm soup filled the air. When he placed the plate in front of her, she tried to protest, but her hunger betrayed her. Each bite felt like warmth returning to her bones, like maybe the world hadn't given up on her yet. Eli sat across from her now, his shift over, the cafe empty except for them. The rain outside softened into a drizzle, and the neon lights from across the street reflected in the window beside them. He didn't ask too many questions. She didn't give too many answers. But between the pauses, the silence said everything, the kind of silence that feels safe. She told him eventually about her failed interview, her struggles to find work, how she'd been living in a rented room with no heating, and how her dreams of becoming a designer now felt like stories from another life. Eli listened, not the way people usually listen, waiting to respond, but with the quiet attention of someone who understood that sometimes being heard is enough to keep you going. He told her about his own past, how he'd once been in college studying architecture until his father got sick and he had to drop out to work full-time. The cafe wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. He still sketched buildings on napkins sometimes, he said with a small laugh, and somehow that made Amara smile for the first time in days. Hours passed without either of them noticing. The city outside had gone quiet. Amara's eyes were softer now, her shoulders no longer so tense. When she finally stood to leave, Eli walked her to the door. He offered her his umbrella, but she shook her head, saying she couldn't take it. So instead, he walked her halfway to the bus stop, even though she had already told him she couldn't afford the fare. When they reached the corner, he pulled a few bills from his pocket and slipped them into her hand before she could argue. "It's not charity," he said. "It's just a little help, until things get better." Her throat tightened. For a moment she couldn't speak. Then she whispered, "Thank you." Eli smiled, the kind of smile that makes people believe in goodness again. "Just promise me you'll pay it forward someday," he said. She nodded, tears in her eyes. "I will." That night she took the bus home. It wasn't much of a home, a small, dim room with cracked walls, but for the first time in weeks, she felt safe enough to sleep. The next morning she woke up with a strange sense of purpose. Maybe it was the soup, maybe it was the kindness, or maybe it was simply the reminder that not everyone walks past you when you're down. She decided to try again. Over the next few days, she started sketching again. She found old pencils and a notebook she'd left untouched since she'd come to the city. Each line she drew brought her closer to the dream she had once buried under exhaustion and fear. She started visiting small shops and cafes, offering to design simple logos or posters. Most people said no, but one local bakery said yes. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Weeks passed, and work slowly trickled in, small commissions, enough to keep her going. Then one afternoon she brought a sample design to a nearby restaurant. The owner loved her work so much that he introduced her to his cousin, who managed a boutique design firm. That introduction changed everything. Within 3 months, Amara had secured a junior position at a design studio. It wasn't the biggest job, but it was honest work, and it made her feel alive again. She often passed by the cafe on her way home, peeking through the window to see if Eli was still there. He always was, moving between tables with that same calm presence. One evening, she walked in again, this time not as a lost stranger, but as someone who had found her footing. She waited until the cafe was nearly empty before approaching the counter. He looked up, surprised, and smiled when he recognized her. "I owe you." "Something," she said softly. He laughed. "You don't owe me anything." She placed a small envelope on the counter. "You told me to pay it forward," she said. "This isn't repayment. It's just the start." Inside the envelope was enough money to cover 10 meals for anyone who couldn't afford one. She had asked the cafe owner if they could quietly start a small fund for people in need, and he had agreed. Eli looked at her for a long moment, his eyes glistening. "You really didn't have to," he said. "I wanted to," she replied, "because someone once believed I was worth helping." Outside, the city lights flickered on, painting the wet streets in shades of gold and blue. They talked for a while longer, not as strangers, but as two people connected by one simple truth. Kindness doesn't just feed the hungry, it awakens the soul. When she left that night, the rain began again, soft and familiar. Eli watched her go, smiling to himself. Sometimes, he thought, the smallest act, a meal, a few kind words, a moment of understanding, could ripple through a life forever. And somewhere deep inside, Amara knew that too, because every dream she rebuilt, every smile she rediscovered, carried a trace of that rainy evening when one person had looked at her not as a burden, but as someone still capable of beginning again. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to help us keep spreading love, hope, and kindness across the world.